Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. I'm your host, Gorgeous George, and with me as always, some of the sharpest MMA minds in the biz. Look at this week's crew. We got Danny Segura, the host of Hablemos MMA, representing Soulfla. Goes from MMA Junkie Radio, coming to you from Sin City. The third man in the booth, it's Dan Tom, our fight analyst, and the host of the Protect Your Neck podcast. Goes will be doubling up on the ones and twos. Let's get started. All right, guys, it's fight week, which is my favorite week of the month. And this Saturday, Nate Diaz headlines UFC 279 versus Khamzat Chimaev. This is the last fight on Diaz's contract, and after 15 years with the UFC, this might be the last time we see him in the octagon. Or maybe not. Guys, you know how this sport is. Expect the unexpected. Should Nate walk or resign? 4 minutes are on the clock. Danny, you're leading off.
I think Nate Diaz is playing it perfectly. If I were his manager, I'd tell him, keep doing you, which is he's determined to become a free agent, but he's not close to re-signing with the UFC. It's just becoming a free agent to test out and see exactly what's out there, what the landscape looks like. And look, he's still a huge star no matter what happens at UFC 279. So I'm sure the option to re-sign with the UFC will be there, even if he does become a free agent. So don't burn any bridges. I don't think it's hard for Nate Diaz to burn any bridges just because he makes a lot of money. So I think the bridge will always be there no matter what he says. But just don't do anything crazy. Keep your options open and test free agency. Look, we got a huge fight coming up, or at least that's what's being reported between Anderson Silva and Jake Paul. That's what it all points down to. If Jake Paul were to beat Anderson Silva, all of a sudden his stardom is going to go through the roof. A potential Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz fight. I mean, you can bet whatever you want that's going to sell well over 1 million pay-per-view buys, which means a lot of money in the Diaz pocket. And look, even after that, the option to re-sign with the UFC, I think, will still be there. So please test out free agency, see what's out there, because free agency just does wonders with fighters that have big names, and that's exactly what Nate Diaz has.
A needle mover. That's what that guy is for sure. How about you, Ghost? What are your thoughts here?
Well, man, I mean, about ruffling feathers. I mean, we saw what Luke Rockhold did, right? And he's still around. So I don't know what Nate Diaz can do. But if I were advising him, I would say leave, but just try not to do it on bad terms. I think the UFC's gotten a lot of bad press from that Luke Rockhold rant. At the end of the day, I think this all does revolve around money, as it does with a lot of athletes. But the one thing you have to take in consideration when it comes to Diaz brothers is I think there's something that a lot of people don't talk about, and that's control. I think Nate Diaz just wants control of his life again. I think that's a major plot here, a plot point in what it is he's trying to establish. So he wants some independence again. He wants the opportunity to go out and do things that's going to make him money in his own way, right? You look at the Diaz brothers and what they can pull in through sponsorships, appearances, things like that. They're one of those few fighters that can actually pull that type of money, and they're losing out on it right now. So I think that's something that's really important for Nate Diaz, and I think he'll have the opportunity to do that if he does leave. Now, granted, yes, he is running a risk, right? What are people going to look at him like if he gets destroyed by Khamzat? We're still not sure. He's still a Diaz brother. He's still popular. If he goes and he boxes and he loses, is the second fight going to be that lucrative for him? I don't know. As we're in the UFC, I think no matter what happens, as long as he comes out and throws 2 middle fingers, which you can't do when you have boxing gloves on, I think people will still want to tune in and watch and see what they do. So if I'm him, I tell him, walk away, but don't burn too many bridges, because even Dustin Poirier would be a fun matchup for him to come back to. But, of course, the big payday is Conor McGregor.
Yeah, throw them middle fingers. Don't throw any water bottles. Dan, Tom, finish up.
Now, I will say I'm open to a Conor McGregor argument as far as staying, but if we're looking at their social medias, especially Conor, with all the things that he says on social media, he really hasn't flexed the Nate Diaz card too much, and neither has Nate, I would argue, as much as they could have. So I'm not sure how much I'm going to bank on that, but I do agree with Goz's note as far as not burning bridges. Maybe not for a potential comeback, because I am siding with that Nate Diaz should walk. But let's be honest, kind of like War MMA, his brother's promotion, Nate, seems to be following in his brother's footsteps in more than one way, right? And as we've seen with Khabib or other fighters, maybe with, Eddie Bravo's EBI, who Eddie didn't even fight in the UFC. But we saw what having a good relationship, what Go said, can do to you. That Fight Pass platform can house a lot of content. It's kind of the content era. So if that's a way for Nate to make money without fighting, I think it's probably good to follow Go's advice. But ultimately, whether it's a Jake Paul boxing or, again, following in his brother's footsteps yet again, maybe having his time under the sun. I know he did have one fight in Strikeforce back in the day, but getting back with Scott Coker. I know Nate is older, but he hasn't exactly been putting on a lot of miles. And let's be honest, we've seen Bellator put on fights with near 50-year-olds like Shamrock and Gracie's past the odds. So I don't think booking Nate Diaz would be a problem. I say walk Nate.
Good stuff, fellas. All right, let's move to topic number 2. I got a little jumpy with the Diaz topic because it is fight week, but I got to show some love to the UFC's debut in Paris, France from this past weekend. Ciryl Gane defeated Tai Tuivasa in the main event, as you all know. Big win for the Frenchman as he's on the hunt for another title shot. Every win carries weight with these top-ranked fighters in these top-ranked matchups. What did this result do in terms for sorting out the top of the heavyweight division? 4 minutes are on the clock. Goes, it's on you, sir.
Well, I think that depends on how you look at it, right? I'll tell you what it means for Francis Ngannou. For Francis Ngannou, I feel like he saw a guy who he just beat get better in kind of a scary fashion, guys. Very crisp, very sharp, good fighter IQ, almost excellent fighter IQ. And I say almost because he did get caught in round 2, but he bounced back. He showed that he can do that. Even though Stipe Miocic has a win over Francis Ngannou, and Francis has one over Ciryl Gane, I still feel like Ciryl Gane, what he did this weekend for the heavyweight division is prove that he is still the most difficult task for Francis Ngannou. Now, the same way Ciryl Gane has improved in this fight, we saw Francis Ngannou improve throughout his careers, especially when he lost to Stipe Miocic. So you got to watch out for that. But Francis is on the mend, and who knows how much work he's putting in right now. What his body is allowing him to do, right? So when you look at what's left with the rest of the heavyweight division, it's going to come down to what it always comes down to: money and politics, right? If Stipe and John Jones play the game, then I think the winner of that would probably be next. But if they throw up any kind of problem, I don't see how Ciryl Gane can't just maybe jump into one of those spots. And lastly, you look at a guy like Tai Tuivasa, he's kind of in a similar situation that Ciryl Gane was just in. Took a bad loss. He's going to have to go back and rebuild, maybe tweak a few things, but people love that guy so much that you never know. He could be right back into the title picture with as active as he is, just a little bit behind the other guys.
All right, Dan Tom, you're next. And man, I know you jumped out of your chair. Round 2 KO. I listened to Protect Your Neck. Almost happened.
Yeah, it did almost happen. And I think, regardless of my pick or play there, I think that Tai Tuivasa would have been a more interesting result for this, interesting part of the topic, which is the post-fight matchmaking and the fallout. Where does it leave us? I mean, where does it kind of leave us as far as where we thought we were? Not very different. We still have the same players. And ultimately, the player of the UFC is the one who decides this, that they have the final say, I should say, not so much the fighters in the cage, unfortunately. And again, we had the minus 600 favorite, though. Let's be honest, folks, the minus 600 favorite fought in the co-main event this past weekend. Am I right? But that being said, Gane did come through. And like many, maybe not me so much, even though I thought it was the most likely outcome, he came through like many predicted, right? So I still think that he's there. I think that he is number 1 for John Jones. And it's tough. I got to try to keep my media hat on here and not let my bias bleed through. But if I'm being honest with you guys, I don't want to give John Jones a gimme. Part of me wants to, because it's like, I don't even know if he's going to fight at heavyweight at this point. I don't believe it till I see it. And I feel like he is going to need the perfect matchup, which is another point fighting kind of heavyweight, even though Gane can get those finishes, man. He's showed some improvements, by the way. But I'm just saying, for Jones's sensibilities, I feel like he really wants Gane. So for that reason, I kind of wanted to stick him with, a Tuivasa if Tuivasa were to win. Or in this case, now answering the question, I would still rather see him with Stipe. Stipe doesn't get enough love. I think that a matchup with Jones, win or lose, would get him that payday. And then if he beats Jones, then he immediately gets the momentum he needs to get back into a title picture. Meanwhile, you've got, Ngannou, obviously, and you could still do a Gane rematch in the meantime. I don't hate any of the points that Goes pointed as far as Gane's improvements and earning that.
All right, Danny, you're up next. Take it over the clock. Let's hear some good stuff from you too.
Yeah, I think it advances the division a bit forward with this result, but not a ton, right? I mean, it's one less contender or title contender to sort of have in that list of who could potentially be next to either challenge Francis or be in an interim title fight. So on that way, it's good. But at the same time, yes, you cross out a title contender, but that list is still very, very long. I think the heavyweight division right now, it's awesome. I think it's probably the healthiest it's been in quite some time, but it still does have some problems. And the problems are not even about the fighters themselves, but about the way I feel like the UFC is managing the division. Look, we've already burned through a lot of time of Francis Ngannou's recovery time. And we're supposed to get this interim title fight at heavyweight in July. Then we heard September. Now we're hearing December. And who knows if it's going to keep getting pushed back. But the clock keeps ticking. Ngannou keeps recovering. And we're getting closer to a return. So if you're going to do an interim title fight, all I ask is that to make it now. Now, if Stipe Miocic can't do it, plug in then Ciryl Gane against John Jones. If John Jones is not ready to sign the contract, then do Stipe Miocic versus Ciryl Gane. Just make the interim title fight now. The last thing I want to see is the interim title keep getting pushed. Then you make it happen, and then all of a sudden, Francis Ngannou comes back 2 or 3 months later after we have an interim champion. I don't think that makes sense at all. Interim titles are there while the champion is out, but if we're going to get close to a Francis Ngannou return, just screw the interim title and then just have John Jones fight Francis Ngannou. That's the biggest fight you can make in the heavyweight division, one of the biggest fights you can make in the sport. So do something. Just don't be tentative. Go either way.
Yeah, this thing has to happen. And in that new stadium we have here in Las Vegas, book January, because usually the Raiders are done in December. So that's my little tip to them. All right, let's go on here with the third topic. Sticking with the Ciryl Gane theme, the win did come with some controversy, and one of the loudest voices was former UFC heavyweight champion Junior Dos Santos. JDS did not like the hammer fist to the back of Tuivasa's head and called Gane a quote-unquote dirty fighter. If you recall, the Gane JDS fight ended in a similar fashion with an illegal elbow to the back of the head, according to JDS, but not according to the referee, Jared Valao. What do you think of Cigano's strong words and the hammer fist itself? Fair or foul? Dan, Tom, get the party started. 4 minutes.
Well, it would make sense that JDS would claim that. Of course, he took an elbow, which our host here, Gorgeous George, has an excellent point on, where you could argue that Gane was perhaps aiming for the ear. Perhaps he was aiming for the ear with this hammer fist that clearly, at least from my purview and the multiple cameras, looked to have hit on the back of the head. Of course, this happened after Tai Tuivasa had been hurt multiple times, both in that round and the round before. Not that excuses an illegal blow, mind you, but it also happened in a flurry, which is hard to call, as if you look at the replay, Goddard was actually moving around for a better angle and just happened to be, to no fault of his own, this happens in the fight game, it's chaotic, did not get the greatest view. So I want to forgive the referee for not calling an illegal strike. That being said, upon replay, when I did see it, Ciryl Gane hurt Tuivasa with a right, follows with a left. He actually goes to throw that hammer fist before he actually threw it, folks, but he stopped himself, which is really hard to do because not only you trained a lot of times to go left, right, they're in the heat of momentum of a fight, and more so in the heat of momentum of a fight finish. But he stops himself, goes and levers double with the left, and that actually moves Tuivasa to a more appropriate angle where the ear was available. It looks like he aims to the ear, to his credit, but still, to reality's credit, it does not hit there. It hits in the back of the head. He gets a finishing shot, left hook. The fight is stopped shortly after. I do not get upset at this. Obviously, I understand why JDS would. I understand why people would call this a trend, but these are really in the heat of battle things. And lastly, but not leastly, before I push on, the hammer fisting motion, particularly with the right hand, is actually something that Ciryl Gane does in a lot of his strikes, even from the opposite side, even with an opposite strike like a jab, he will actually hammer it out. So this motion is actually consistent with how he moves. I think he should change his targets, though, after this fight.
All right. Sounds like a fair from Dan. Tom, how about you, Danny Segura?
I think I very much agree with Dan, Tom's points here, but I do think that Ciryl Gane needs to, one, be more careful, and two, referees need to watch out because this is kind of starting to become a trend. Junior Dos Santos is well in his right to complain about those elbows because they did land in the back of the head. I do think that he was on his way out, right? Ciryl Gane had hurt Junior Dos Santos prior to those elbows. Same thing with Tai Tuivasa. Tuivasa was on his way out before the illegal strike came down. So I think that's worth noticing. And also, during the finishing sequence, it's always chaotic. We always see fighters get struck in the back of the head. Again, I'm not excusing it. I'm not saying it's okay, but at least the fighter was on his way out, right? It's not like the case of Peter Yan and Aljamain Sterling, where you see a fighter in his full senses just get illegally hit with a knee, and then you go, okay, that clearly changed the course of the fight. So that's worth noting. Also, Tai Tuivasa didn't really complain after the fact. I don't know how much he remembers. Obviously, it's, he did get hit pretty hard, but it's been a few days as well, and he hasn't complained about it. So that's also worth noting. But I will say that Ciryl Gane is still landing illegal shots. I thought the shots against Dos Santos were illegal. Obviously, this is pretty clearly illegal as well. So he needs to be careful. A referee needs to warn him and sort of watch out as far as like future bouts go, because illegal shots are illegal shots. And also something that I wanted to note, Ciryl Gane entered both fights as the favorite, and people kind of expected him to win and Rice. And I feel like that does have a little thing in public perception, right? I think if it would have been the other way around, like Tai Tuivasa knocks out Ciryl Gane with an illegal shot, or Junior Dos Santos knocks out Ciryl Gane with an illegal shot, I do feel like people would be talking about it more and making it a little bit of a bigger deal. So I've seen some comments out there saying that, hey, Junior Dos Santos is just salty, this and that. I think that's quite unfair. I do think he's got some ground to stand on this point.
All right, we got a fair and a foul, but Goes, we don't have much time. Fair or foul? How about you?
I'm going to call foul on these two guys, man. All right. I'll keep it short. I honestly think it happened in the fight, and I agree with a lot of what both Dan said here. But at the end of the day, you have to be able to explain it to the fighter. He's going to say, I got hit in the back of the head. Why wasn't it a foul, right? Regardless of what the intentions were or what. So I think moving forward, we just got to tell the referees the same way when other fighters brought up John Jones' eye pokes, right? You lay that foundation, you stress it in the locker room for the next fight, and then if it happens, you call that foul a lot easier. I think that's the best thing to do moving forward.
Good stuff, guys. All right, we got to move on, though. Topic 4, Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva, folks. Yeah, that's expected to happen. First reported by No Smoke Boxing initially, and now we know that Silva has been granted a pro boxing license by the Arizona Commission. As we record this, an announcement appears to be imminent. Guys, Paul has definitely been hit or miss with MMA fans, but his opponent this time is the beloved Spider, one of the GOATs of MMA. Do you love or hate this matchup? 4 minutes are on the clock. Danny Segura, we're coming back to you.
I love it. I love it. And I've had a change in mind, I would say, in recent weeks about Jake Paul. For the longest time, I'm like, look, it's time for him to get tested against the boxer. He's doing the sport of boxing. Come on, put a boxer in there. Again, doesn't have to be a world beater, but let's see him against the boxer, right? But then I've had some time to think after this rumors came out, and I'm like, what am I most excited for? Tommy Fury versus Jake Paul, or Jake Paul versus Rahman Jr., or Anderson Silva versus Jake Paul? Clearly, the Anderson Silva fight, I think, does a lot more for people than the other bouts. And look, at the end of the day, Jake Paul is an entertainer. Do we really think he's going to build a record and go challenge for the WBA, WBO, UFO, whatever the hell? There's so many belts nowadays that it's hard to keep up. Do we really think he's going to do that? No, he's an entertainer. So let him be an entertainer. So take the route of entertainment, but at the same time, let's see some progression in skill, right? We don't want to see washes. We don't want to see him picking up on fighters that are completely done with the sport. I know Anderson Silva is closer to 50 than he is to 40, but you just got to look at the man. He's still in great shape. He's still doing great things out there. He's got great movement, good hands, clearly a beloved figure, an important figure in the mixed martial arts community. So I'm all for it. I think this matchup makes the most sense, and I think this is the route to go. Just entertain, have some good fights, make it a little bit more competitive as far as progression goes, as far as his career goes. So I'm all in. I love this fight.
Well put. How about you, Goes? What are your thoughts here?
I think Danny squashed any opportunity for GSP to ever box. If there really is a UFO title out there, he wants none of that. But it's definitely a step up in competition for him. I kind of love it, dude. It's another chance for him to get a W over a former UFC champion, which is kind of how he's been approaching his career here and really building the stock. It is a huge risk, though. I'll tell you that. We'll do a little bit of boxing and MMA math here. He had an opportunity, Jake Paul, and to be a little bit more legit, right, in fighting an actual boxer and Rahman Jr., but that fell apart, and I kind of understand his reasoning behind it. But he can make up a little ground here, and I'll tell you why. And this is how the math works. Anderson Silva has a win over Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. And I know Jr. didn't live up to the potential that his dad had, right? Not even close. But he's still a decent boxer, a guy that grew up in the sport, that did this every day. And Anderson Silva made him look foolish at times. He's a bigger guy. He's got a boxing body, and he doesn't come in this like an MMA guy trying to box. He actually goes in there and boxes like a boxer. So if Jake Paul can get this victory, I think it'd be pretty big for him. I think it would really show us that he's taken this very seriously and taken another step in his progression. So I would give him a little bit of that credit and a little bit of the points that he lost out in fighting Rahman. So I love this fight, and I would definitely tune in because I'm a hardcore fan, man. And Jake Paul's kind of won me over too.
The debut of MMA and boxing math. I love it, Goes. All right, Dan, Tom, finish up.
All right, I got to go against goes with the Jake Paul love. In fact, I'd be giving a hand gesture that I'm pretty sure is not appropriate for me to do, but if you guys know what I'm talking about, that's what I'm doing in my head. But no, in all seriousness here, listen, my unlike Danny, my view on Jake Paul has only been reaffirmed in recent times. That being said, as a hipster, as a hater, you guys probably know where I'm going, even if you don't know me, with that intro there. But honestly, that being said, even though I've only been more affirmed with Jake Paul and his whole Rockman pullout, and let's be honest, he was afraid of those low numbers, amongst other things. This guy doesn't really care about fighter pay like he's been claiming. Good for you. You're very privileged, and you can take the time to train. Good for you. There's a bunch of people who do the same thing and nobody cares. So I don't give that sympathy. I'm training myself. Nobody cares. Nobody should care that I'm training. What the heck have I done? But there is a southpaw, not me, Anderson Silva, baby, who does want to fight him. It doesn't matter if the basketball player that he fought was a southpaw, because outside of that, I'm pretty sure Jake Paul has not fought a southpaw, much less any real fighters. He's going to get that with Anderson Silva, a guy who can actually box. And someone who might break me, Mr. Honor, Mr. Tradition over here, come from traditional martial arts, because yes, Jake Paul, some of us have dedicated our whole lives to this game. I will break my honor code and meme the crap out of Jake Paul of what happens to him if Anderson Silva does what I think he's going to do. Old man power, baby. Old men are getting it. We're getting back in there. 2022, 2023. Let's get it, Anderson. Southpaws, you're going down, Jake.
All right.
I kind of want to see now Dan Tom versus Jake Paul. Maybe, I don't know if there's some wiggle room now to change that, but he's kind of won me over now.
I called him out back in the MMA Junkie radio days, and I'm actually training now. But he's bigger than I thought, and I don't think he wants to grapple anybody, much less a nobody. So the fact that he wouldn't want to risk himself for a nobody like myself, nor would he want to grapple, because I think he sucks and he'll get really gassed out, and I would arm triangle the crap out of him. Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Put me down.
Rama meme. Take my money. Take my money.
I want Zuckerberg on the undercard. Who do you got, Danny?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good
Zuckerberg.
one. Is it going to be himself or the meta version of himself?
Yeah, all right.
All right. We got to move on to the next one here. We got to finish up here. We started this week's SBC talking Nate Diaz. We end this week's SBC talking Nate Diaz. Well, kinda. Diaz originally came from the World Extreme Cage Fighting Organization. WEC is one of the biggest promotions that was absorbed by the UFC under the Zuffa era, the others being Pride FC Fighting Championships and Strikeforce. Since most of the fighters from each promotion are now gone, let's reflect. Which promotion did the UFC squeeze the most juice from? 4 minutes are on the clock. Goes, take it away.
All right, here's the thing. When you look at why these purchases were made, and you look at Strikeforce, who I'm going with, Strikeforce came in at a time that the UFC was starting to expand. They needed headline fighters. And that's what they got from Strikeforce. If you think about how many of those fighters came in and headlined some of the smaller cards and even the bigger cards, man, did they really, really help with that influx of talent. And you're talking about some that even paid off at a really high level, like a Daniel Cormier, Alistair Overeem, Tyron Woodley, Fabricio Verdum, Jorge Masvidal. We could go on and on. The WEC, what they did was when they came in, they helped them lighter divisions, right? But what about Strikeforce? What did they do? They did a lot for the ladies, right? What's the UFC without Ronda Rousey, without Chris Cyborg? Don't forget Miesha Tate, and don't forget Amanda Nunes. She fought there too. I believe she had a couple fights there, right? So they helped with the women's division. There's 2 Strikeforce champions, in the Hall of Fame, right? Strikeforce eventually, I think they had like 6 Ultimate Fighter coaches that helped out with that. And then you think about some of the people that they brought back from back in the day, right? Your Dan Hendersons, your Robbie Lawlers, what they were able to do. Again, Amanda Nunes, even Cain Velasquez and Michael Chandler had fights at Strikeforce that people don't know about. They had so many contributions to the sport and eventually the UFC that, they're going to argue there is no wrong or right answers, but unless you guys are picking Strikeforce, you're wrong.
Híjole, man, this is like high stakes poker, and I feel like Goes has revealed like a full house. Well, let's see what you guys got. Dan, Tom, you're up next.
I'm going to go with the momentum argument, because a lot of this was momentum, I feel like, that had these sales, right, for the UFC to absorb WEC and Strikeforce and Pride, right? But what came first, the chicken or the egg, guys? Now, you could argue that would this have happened anyways? Perhaps, but I think it would have been much harder to acquire a Strikeforce with all the talents and all the great points that it brings along, that goes packaged so wonderfully. And I look forward to what Danny says about WEC. I'll steer clear of those points. I'll let him hit those, because I think there's really valid points for both of those. But both of those happened after Pride. And there was the Dana White tombstone, and Strikeforce was on that tombstone. So it was a valid target for the UFC. I'm not going to about to tell you an attempt to win this argument and say that it wasn't. It totally was. But we also had that epic meme of Dana White doing the puppet master thing, right? And that was, that comes from more of the Pride days, the Pride versus UFC wars. That's more the old school heads. And I know my panel members are real educated on those days there. And when you had that and you had that absorption, of course, there was a lot of tomfoolery as far as what did they really buy? They bought a library. They didn't necessarily get all the other fighters. They had to actually do other rigmaroles and jump through other hoops with other different management to collect some other names that would have become maybe light heavyweight champions, so to speak. But what was going on in the UFC and MMA then? What was it called? I believe it was a G and an E. Oh, that's right. The golden era. It was the golden era. And they literally absorbed their competition in the golden era. And that golden era and all the popularity, all the sponsorships, all of that created the momentum so that we could buy the Strikeforce and get those benefits, so that we could buy the WEC. So maybe I'm an old school guy. I love giving credit to history. Maybe it's that bias here, folks. But I'm going with Pride. I feel like, this is a chicken before the egg argument, but I feel like Pride was the egg that hatched it. And, UFC is maybe the chicken that takes the hen here. We'll see.
All right, finishing things up is Danny Segura. You taking the WEC, or do you agree with one
Yeah,
of these guys?
I'm going with WC, but man, both these guys make excellent points. I mean, there's no denying that the UFC benefited greatly from both Strikeforce and Pride FC. I mean, if you talk about 205 division, when they absorbed Pride and they brought in all those legends of Pride when they were still in their prime, I mean, that's the most stacked a division has ever been in the history of the sport. The light heavyweights, when that absorption came, was just ridiculous. But I'm going to go with WEC just because I'm a huge fan of the lighter weight classes, 145, 135, Jose Aldo, Uriah Faber, Cub Swanson, Demetrius Johnson. I mean, we're talking about one of the greatest. I mean, just the list goes on of how many fighters came through on the lighter weight classes. And also, I remember a time that below 155, like, people didn't really want to see those fighters. They were like, kind of like, they're too small, they're not fun. And WEC was a promotion that brought respect to the lighter weight classes. And all of a sudden people were like, damn, those guys can fight. They're pretty high level and they're pretty exciting as well. So I have a soft spot for WEC. Absolutely love it. Plus the whole blue canvas. I loved everything about WEC. So I'm going with WEC. Just gave us the lighter weight classes, put respect for the lighter names, and it's just stacked with names, and they're still living today, so they're still fighting today.
Let's not forget they also give us Brittany Palmer.
That's true. Yeah. And look, even some guys that were not even that well known, but
Chael Sonnen had a
Sonnen, Carlos Condit gave us some wars. I mean,
Brian Stan, one of the best commentators.
Some guys above were pretty good still.
Yeah, good point, Dan. Brian Stan, who I think elevated the preparations for the commentators. Yep. A lot of them point to John Anik. John will be the first one to go, I got the baton from Brian Stan. Man, you guys killed it on that last question. Great job. I didn't even care about the clock. I do apologize to Cole Coffee and Kamikaze, whoever is handling the B-roll, for going over. You guys are studs. This video is great because of our videographers. And I also want to give a YouTube shout out to Michael Hosier on the August 30th YouTube comments. Great stuff, great feedback. I'm going to look for some great comments this week as well. Don't forget, UFC 279 is on Saturday. Goes tonight. We'll be hosting a watch along here on MMA Junkie. Our colleague Farah Hanoun will also do a preview show. I imagine these guys will be popping in with her. So keep it locked on MMA Junkie all week, and we'll see you next week to discuss it all on Spinning Back Clique.